First question is to Councillor Peelo. What is your opinion on the government's decision to not increase the Apprentices' hourly rate to that of 16-year-olds' national minimum wage?
I'm a big believer not just in the minimum wage. I think we need to work towards a living wage. And what we need to have a look at is a priority. And do we actually believe as a society, as a community, that apprenticeships are part of our priority? And I'm a firm believer in that it is, because it actually helps economic cohesion as well. If we get skilled young people, we become more self-sufficient as a society in being able to address all of those things that we do. And as soon as we move away from that self-sufficiency, that's when some of the arguments that start to actually unwind community cohesion. So I think we've got an awful lot to be proud of, but it's how we actually invest within the next generation is one of the key points. So to directly answer your question, absolutely believe in the minimum wage for everybody who's on the apprentice, but we should be looking towards actually moving them from a minimum wage onto the living wage.
Would you consider raising the rate of pay for taking on apprentices, as this would attract more young people as the current rate is low?
The proudest moment of my life was when the minimum wage was introduced. For my wife, she works in a care home. Her wage doubled overnight. She couldn't believe that that was going to happen, and it made her realise the importance of looking wider in society as well. She just looked at herself and then suddenly realised that there were all these people whose wage had gone up so tremendously. So for me, I think our problem is, at the moment, is that if we decide to set a wage, right, for anybody, we've got to look at the terrible times that we're in. So, whilst my heart is saying yes, we should increase the rate for apprentices, and I think it's something that now we've developed apprentices more in the last 2 to 3 years with this council. I mean, we now, I think, employ most apprentices in the Black Country, I think it is, just from this council. That we've now got to start looking at those sorts of things. We want to keep you. I mean, I think that's for me. This is about investing in you and our society. I mean, one of the things that we've introduced as well this year, and it is the first year, we've got quite a number of looked after children in care. And what we've said, and we've started to do it, we've got the first ever this year, is that we should be able to offer all of our children in care an apprenticeship. So from my point of view, I think that now we've established the apprenticeships properly, we should start to look at that and look at a wage structure within it, because we want you to stay. We want you to have a job once you finish your apprenticeship. That should surely be the way forward.
But what we've got to look towards creating are real jobs for real people with a real future. We've got to move away from where society has taken us over the last few years of short-term, 0 hours contracts, but actually keep people trapped within that system. I mean, I remember as an example, I went on what was deemed as training, but in effect was an apprenticeship when I did my nurse training. And what I actually received as part of that was not just the regular income and regular training, but also the potential of getting a job at the end of that. So during that time, I could actually not just plan for my future. I met my wife. We managed to get a flat together, all with the income that I was receiving from that. Now, if we were to fast forward 20 years, well, actually 30 years, I'll pretend it's 20 years, and look at your generation, you actually haven't got those opportunities that I had 30 years ago. And I think that as a society that should be moving forward, we've actually got to a situation where an awful lot of the younger generation are actually trapped, whether that be at home or whether that be because you can't take advantage, because you actually don't have the security of jobs coming through. So absolutely, we've got to look towards a jobs guarantee for each young person, whether they choose to go on an apprenticeship or whatever work that they need to go.
As there are no jobs guaranteed after the apprenticeship programme, would you consider guaranteeing progress to a higher level of apprenticeship?
I think we've got to look a bit wider now. We've got a number of other big employers within Dudley who we can go into partnership with. We've just gone into partnership with the council. That's over the college, Dudley College. And now, I mean, I work for the civil service, and on the waterfront, there are approximately 2,500 civil servants. I've just heard today that we're taking on our first apprentices ever on the waterfront, all right? And we actually run a scheme of, within the place where I work, of work experience for local schools, which is coming very useful for people. So from my point of view, whilst we might not be able to offer everybody either a job or that high level of apprenticeship, I'm absolutely certain that we can work with local firms, local big employers, but all the banks around here. Look at Merry Hill. You know, there are an enormous number of jobs. I went to the Apprenticeship fair the other day and found out that Kentucky Fried Chicken do an apprenticeship scheme. And it's not just about being a manager in a shop. It's a much broader apprenticeship scheme because they're a huge company, aren't they? You know, they employ thousands of people across the whole of this. McDonald's do apprenticeships. Rolls-Royce do apprenticeships. You know, but you look closer around here as well. We've got some really brilliant engineering firms around in Dublin. Some of the leaders in the whole world. A lot of it to do with motor cars. So it might be that as you move through your apprenticeships, you might get a taste of something like that and say, hey, I wouldn't mind that. Or they might want to do the business side. You know, so whilst I come back to, yes, I believe that we should, by whatever means we have to, be able to offer these high-level apprenticeships.
If we don't secure employment within the council by the end of our apprenticeship, is there any way that we could get priority for a certain time period after leaving our apprenticeship to be considered for jobs?
And I think it's a really good question actually, Lauren, because that recognises the austerity the local authorities are in at the moment. So whilst we look towards a guaranteed job, there can be no certainty with the cuts that come forward. However, what we need to be able to do is, as soon as hopefully that situation improves in years or months to come, that we have an opportunity to be able to retain that talent as the jobs come forward. And that's not just in the interest of you as the apprentice, that's actually in the interest of us as the employer as well. Because we've invested that time and energy in ensuring that you become absolutely proficient in the jobs that you do. I think it would be total false economy if we were to allow you just to be able to walk away and leave without keeping your CV on file so that we can call for you as soon as that money is made available for us to be able to create jobs.
For people that work with you, it's a wholly new way of working and they're learning as well. And one of the things that comes out of that is that we have a thing called the Torch programme, where those are employees that we've got from throughout the council, where we're bringing them together to look at things like this and see how we can develop further the apprenticeship. So the stuff we learn from you might mean actually that we see the apprenticeship route as the way to getting most of our employees coming on board with us. You know, and I think that if we can develop it that way, it's vital to me that we get a real good handle on what we need for this council and how we can then start talking back with the colleges and with the schools about how we get prepared for it. We're one of the biggest employers, you know, in the whole of Dudley. We need to have that going, so I wouldn't want a target in there. I think I'm proud actually that we've increased it to the levels that we have. The business value of having apprentices well outweighs anything else, and so we'll carry on, I think, to increase apprenticeships.
As you may know, a lot of money has been spent on training apprentices throughout different areas of work, especially for me as I'm in horticulture, you know, for training these young hedge cutters and strimmers and whatever. And we're not guaranteed jobs at the end of it. You know, if we wasn't to get a job at the end of it, a private company could come along and snap us up, and all that training experience that you pay for us to keep is basically going. Basically, you're paying for the private sector to have us. Don't you think this is a waste of money?
The fact that we're able to give an apprenticeship, and the fact that we may not at the end of that day, for whatever reason, be able to offer a job, what we've done as a council and as a community council, because that's what we are, you know, we have got somebody from within our community better skilled, better armed, has much greater, and probably with better values as well, because one of the things I'd say about this council is that the things that I really notice about the employees is the values that they have. You know, they really do have a commitment towards public service, and they're good people. You know, very much like all the rest of the people in Dudley, they're good people that work here. So you will have learned an awful lot. And the other thing I'd say is that we've got employers out there who desperately need the skills that we may be able to give you. And they are part of Dudley as well, aren't they? They're part of our community. So whilst in that moment you think, oh, damn, we've lost somebody, but actually, if you then go on to work in a local company and your life is developed because of what you've learned here, then that to me has as much value.
In horticulture and other areas, there's a reduction in budget, but there's money being spent for projects elsewhere, like for example Starbridge in Bloom, Howzone in Bloom, and so forth. And couldn't this money be invested in offering us apprentices jobs?
The examples that you use are good examples which demonstrate finance streams which come into the council. I mean, a large part of the budget, and the council actually receives hundreds of millions of pounds coming in. But large chunks of that, a significant majority of all that money, is what's called ring-fenced money. So you actually can't use it outside of what it is used for. Perfect example is Dudley Marketplace at the moment, where there's about £6 million being invested. Now, if we had full control, there'd be a discussion to say, well, we've got £6 million coming in. How's the best way in order for us to be able to invest that? However, the way that currently local government funding works is that most of the projects that we actually deliver are tied into what we have to deliver. We can't actually vary away from that. So the simple answer is, at the moment, local government hasn't got the flexibility to do exactly what you suggest. We are as a council actually advocating to the government that all local councils should be given more flexibility over what they do with the money that they've been provided. Because I'm probably say this as a nurse, but I'm a big believer in early intervention, and that also works economically as well. Is if you can invest in the infrastructure, that might actually cost you a significant amount of money in separate costs. But if you can keep that going for 3 or 4 years, in the long run you save a significant amount of money because you've invested, topped up in the front in order to get the rewards 4 or 5 years down the line.